Ever wished you could just point your phone at, I don't know, a weird spill in the kitchen or some powder you found and boom,
Hmm.
instantly know what it is without needing like a whole chemistry lab setup?
Yeah, that kind of everyday mystery, it actually sparks some really cool science. And it turns out some researchers at Florida State University have been working on something pretty remarkable along those lines.
Absolutely. That's what we're diving into today. It's this fascinating project where chemists developed a machine learning tool.
Sure.
And get this, it can identify the chemical makeup of dried salt solutions with like 99% accuracy.
Right.
And the really wild part, it does it just from looking at a picture.
Exactly. It sounds almost like science fiction, but it's real. We're looking at an article from analytica-world.com that breaks down this research, which also got published in Digital Discovery. So this isn't just an idea, it's a working tool based on solid research.
And I think for anyone listening who wants to kind of grasp complex stuff without drowning in technical jargon, this is just fascinating. Imagine the potential, right? Instantly getting a basic chemical read on things around you just with a photo.
Uh-huh.
It's like unlocking this hidden layer of information that's already there in visuals,
Yeah.
those little aha moments waiting in plain sight.
Definitely. And our mission today is really to unpack the clever thinking here. We'll look at how it works, why it's such a big step forward for chemical analysis, and some of the surprisingly diverse ways this could actually be used out in the real world.
Okay, let's get into it. This incredible achievement. Fundamentally, they figured out how to tell what different dried salt solutions are just by analyzing pictures of them with machine learning.
And the accuracy level is, well, it's seriously impressive, hitting 99% accuracy in identifying the chemical composition. That's the work of Oliver Steinbach and Amrutha SV over at FSU's Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry.
So what pushed them to do this? I mean, what were the problems with the usual ways of analyzing chemicals that they wanted to sort of solve?
That's a really good question. Because, think about how we normally do chemical analysis. The traditional methods, they work, obviously, but they often come with significant drawbacks.
Like cost.
Yeah, cost is a big one. Plus, you often need really sophisticated, sometimes bulky equipment. And crucially, you need people with very specialized training to run it all.
Right. It's not like you could just whip out a mass spectrometer if you find a weird stain on the carpet. You'd have to send a sample off somewhere, wait, and pay.
Precisely. So the core drive here was to find a way to do chemical analysis that was, well, simple and much cheaper. Professor Steinbach mentioned that, we're in this age of AI and big data.
Hmm.
And that kind of sparked this idea, could they maybe train an AI by just showing it tons and tons of pictures of what different chemicals look like when they dry?
Okay, so how do they actually make that leap from that idea to getting, 99% accuracy? What was the tech involved?
Well, it really boils down to a smart combination of two things. Robotics to prepare loads of samples consistently, and then machine learning to actually analyze the pictures.
Robotics. Okay, tell me more about that.
Yeah, they built this system, and they call it the Robotic Drop Imager, RODI for short.
RODI. Okay.
And this thing is basically an automated workhorse. It can prepare something like over 2,000 samples every single day.
Oh, 2,000 a day.
Yeah. And that kind of automation was absolutely vital. It's what let them build up this massive library of images to train the AI.
That scale is huge. The article points out they went from about 7,500 samples in earlier work to over 23,000 this time. That's a massive jump in data.
It really is.
Yeah.
And more data usually means better training for the AI. So once RODI did its job preparing samples and taking pictures, the next step was processing those images. They simplified them first, converting them to grayscale.
So taking out the color, just focusing on light and dark patterns.
Exactly. And then from each grayscale image, they extracted 47 distinct features. These are things that capture subtle visual details, like the overall area the dried drop covers, the texture inside the pattern, how brightness varies across it, that sort of thing.
Right, so like 47 little visual clues or fingerprints for each chemical pattern. And that's what the machine learning program learned to spot.
Precisely. They fed this much, much larger data set, all these images, each tagged with a known chemical, into the machine learning program. And that huge increase in data is what boosted the accuracy so dramatically, from around 90% up to nearly 99%.
That jump is incredible.
It really highlights how important large, high-quality data sets are for training AI effectively. And what's also quite cool is that the program wasn't just identifying what the salt was.
Yeah.
It could also figure out the initial concentration of the solution it came from.
Really? With what kind of accuracy?
with about 92% accuracy. So not only what is it, but also roughly how much was dissolved to start with.
That's amazing. Okay, super clever tech. But let's zoom out a bit. Why does this actually matter? What kind of real-world impact could this have? Where could we see this being used?
Yeah, the potential applications are actually pretty broad and could make a real difference in several fields. Interestingly, the original idea, or at least a major push for it, came from working with NASA.
NASA. Okay, how does this fit with space?
Well, they were looking for a method to figure out chemical compositions that was low cost and critically very lightweight for space missions.
That makes total sense. Sending lab equipment into space is incredibly expensive and difficult. Every gram counts, right?
Exactly what Professor Steinbach highlighted. Imagine a rover on Mars or the Moon. Instead of needing complex sampling tools and labs on board, maybe it could just use its camera to do some initial analysis of rocks or soil. On-site analysis becomes much more feasible.
Okay, space exploration, that's cool. But back here on Earth, where else could this be useful?
Well, the researchers mention a few key areas. Think about law enforcement. This could potentially be used for, like, rapid preliminary tests on suspected drugs. You often only have tiny amounts.
Right, a quick photo could give an initial clue at a scene.
Potentially, yeah. Or in labs, imagine a spill happens. You could quickly snap a picture to get an idea of what you're dealing with for safety reasons.
Okay, that makes sense.
And even in healthcare, maybe in hospitals or clinics that don't have, full-blown chemical analysis labs on site, it could perhaps aid in some initial diagnostic steps in certain situations.
So it really spans quite a range from planetary science down to, well, potentially hospital diagnostics.
Yeah.
It feels like it could make chemical analysis much more accessible.
That's a really important takeaway, actually. Professor Steinbach made that point, too, about democratizing chemical analysis. Traditional methods, as we said, often need big budgets and specialized know-how. That creates barriers. This image-based approach, using just a camera and AI, could potentially lower those barriers quite significantly.
And it really speaks to this broader trend, doesn't it? AI transforming how science gets done.
Absolutely. It fits into this bigger picture of how AI is becoming a transformative tool across so many scientific fields. The article notes that Florida State University is really encouraging these kinds of innovative AI projects.
Yeah.
And Professor Steinbach himself really drove this home, saying AI is fundamentally changing how we even think about tackling scientific problems. Things that used to absolutely require expensive gear and years of training might, in some cases, be approached now with just a camera and some smart software.
It really opens up possibilities not just for space, but across the board, medicine, environmental science, you name it.
Exactly. New ways of discovering things.
And for anyone listening who really wants to dig into the details, the original paper is out there, right?
Yes, that's right. It was published in Digital Discovery. The title is High Throughput Robotic Collection, Imaging, and Machine Learning Analysis of Salt Patterns. Composition and concentration from dried droplet photos. Quite a mouthful, but it's all in there.
Good to know. So just to kind of wrap up the key points here, FSU researchers built this AI tool. It identifies chemicals in dried salts just from pictures, gets nearly 99% accuracy.
Yeah.
And this was possible because they used robots to create a massive image library for the AI to learn from. And potential uses are huge: space, crime scenes, labs, healthcare, making analysis potentially cheaper and easier.
Exactly. I think the real wow factor, the sort of aha moment, is that a simple photo, something we take all the time, can actually contain so much detailed chemical information, and that AI can be trained to read it so accurately.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-bending. And hopefully for everyone listening, this deep dive has kind of shown a light on how science keeps finding these clever new ways to understand the world, tapping into that basic human curiosity, that desire for quick, insightful knowledge. It really feels like a glimpse into a future where complex science becomes maybe surprisingly accessible.
It definitely leaves you thinking, doesn't it? And maybe here's a final thought for our listeners to chew on. If a camera plus AI can now do this kind of chemical analysis, what other complex tasks, things we usually think require specialized labs or instruments, might become, well, radically simpler in the next few years? What everyday problems or mysteries out there could be solved if we just applied a similar kind of thinking, combining readily available tech-like cameras with smart AI? It's fascinating to consider the possibilities.